This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. In the aftermath of Helene and Milton, there's now stories out there about a potential severe solar storm that could be threatening the United States of America's power grid. Now, this is like killing two birds with one stone, right? Going through Florida with Milton and then cutting the electricity to millions of customers, because those are the stories that are out there. Milton slams Florida, cutting electricity to 3 million customers. We know that a lot of people are without electricity in the Carolinas and people who are affected by Helene. But if you understand what's going on, which I know most of you do, part of creating this new infrastructure is the power grid has to be destroyed. I've talked about it over the years, all the propaganda that they've planted seeds into your head with, talking about how our power grid was ripe for the picking, right? Remember some of the stories of people just going up to power grids with guns and shooting the power grids? Nothing that made any sense whatsoever. Then 60 Minutes would put stuff out about, wow, there's people that are able to go up to the power grids and just shoot at them and shut them off. Imagine what Russia could do or China could do, right? Making you think that a boogeyman may come and shut off your power grid. At the same exact time that they're telling you those stories, they're openly telling you that we need a new power grid, that our government wants a new power grid, and they want to go green, because green energy, of course, is controllable energy. It would make you have to put caps on how much electricity you use every day. And then they would tell you, well, that's because you have to do it to be a good person, right? So when you smell for 5 days because you haven't been able to shower because you're sweating out all the chemicals from your processed food, you might want to take a shower and the government's going to say you can't. When you want to go see grandma on her deathbed, the government's going to say you can't, because you're allotted electricity as part of your carbon footprint. So now we're hearing stories about severe solar storms conveniently coming through. Severe solar storms could stress the power grids even more as the U.S. deals with major back-to-back hurricanes. Part of Agenda 2030 and going green will involve a grid shutdown. Now, I don't know how long it would possibly be. I know a lot of people out there disagree with me on the grid shutdown, just like a lot of people out there disagree with me about red and blue states and hurting people to places like Florida, then hitting them with massive hurricanes, or hitting states like the Carolinas that we know are conservative states. But a lot of people don't think the grid will go down because they think the government will lose control. I actually think it would be the opposite effect. I think that people will beg the government for electricity beyond, because nobody knows how to live without electricity. Okay, none of us, we're all dependent on electricity, whether we want to believe it or not. It's not as easy as we think to go off grid. Now, people go, well, if they're off their phones for a few days, they might start living a normal life again. But the reality is that people if your internet goes down for 10 minutes, most people lose their mind. If your power goes off for an hour, most people think it's off for 5 days, because that's how it feels to them mentally. So if the government shuts the power off and tells you that it's a solar flare, and they use some type of an EMP, which we've all warned about, which would shut off all electronics, kind of like what we saw in movies like Leave the World Behind. We've seen a lot of predictive programming with an EMP, electromagnetic pulse. They would disable all electronics, right? So people go, well, if they disable all electronics, they'll lose total control. Well, they'll disable electronics and then bring in new electronics. Bring in electronics that they want to make sure that you have, electronics that have more control over you, including things like a digital ID. So it's almost like a reset. You know that reset we always hear them talk about? Well, the power grid and the infrastructure change is part of it. And it's only a matter of time before they literally do something to the power grid, which would be the equivalent of somebody pressing or leaning up against an off button. Because all the narratives they tell you about solar flares, they're all make-believe. Just like all the narratives they told you about bats flying out of labs was make-believe. It's all psychological. If they can convince you of these boogeymen things that nobody could see or touch that are based on science, they can get away with this stuff. If you knew that people were actually doing this, then you would hold them accountable. You would remove them from their positions of power. You would arrest them for crimes against humanity, right? Those are the things that would occur. So look at all the stories that are out there right now, including this one. U.S. issues solar storm watch after a large outburst from the sun. Severe solar storm could cause tech disruptions, bringing northern lights farther south. So you also have the tie-in with what they're doing in the sky with HAARP, with geoengineering, with this artificial auroras that we're constantly seeing as well. So they're also going to tell you that we're going to see more severe solar storms in the sky, which could disrupt your technology. Don't think anything of it, because nobody's sick enough to do this to you. And then you start thinking to yourself, oh, wait a minute, they are sick enough. Everybody should have saw that in 2020, how sick they were. Everybody should have saw that when they were telling people that if they didn't poison themselves, they weren't allowed to earn money to feed their families, or they weren't allowed to leave their home unless they put a diaper on their face. I mean, people should have saw that already. And if you haven't seen it by now, then you're literally a lost cause. But I'll continue to try to fight for those people who are a lost cause, because there's still people in there that can be pulled out of this matrix. So the story that's out there, severe solar storm is headed to Earth that could stress power grids even more as the U.S. deals with major back-to-back hurricanes, according to the space weather forecasters. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration issued a severe geomagnetic storm watch for Thursday into Friday after an outburst from the sun. How convenient, right? How convenient. I mean, how many coincidences can happen at once? So there's these hurricanes that are happening where they're borderlining on telling us they're category 6s, right? Where places are put underwater in the mountains that you wouldn't think it was possible, or tornadoes are popping up on the ocean. All these crazy weather anomalies, while there's northern lights all over the place. Also at the same time, ladies and gentlemen, there's outbursts from the sun happening at the same exact time, right? I mean, how convenient. So an outburst from the sun was detected earlier this week. Such a storm could temporarily disrupt power and radio signals. NOAA has notified operators of power plants and orbiting spacecraft to take precautions. Sorry, it's hard not to laugh at orbiting spacecraft. It's also alerted FEMA about possible power disruptions as the organization copes with the devastating aftermath of Helene and Milton barreling across the Gulf of Mexico through Florida. Forecasters do not expect the latest solar storm to surpass the one that slammed Earth in May, the strongest in more than 2 decades, but they won't know for sure until it's just 1 million miles away where spacecraft can measure it, right? Or like I said, they could just press the off button. It's not as complicated as you might think. They make it sound complicated. Oh, when it's 1 million miles away, people's brains just go, what? Wait, they could measure something 1 million miles away? I mean, 1 mile down the road seems far to me. Well, that's just people who know what they're doing what they know what they're doing. This is literally people making stuff up to make you believe that all of the problems you're having in your life, all the meddling going on, the disruptions, I should say, in your life are happening because of science, right? But then when you actually just start sitting there and you start saying, well, did stuff like this happen from like 1970 to 2000? No. Well, look how all this stuff is just happening at once. Look at the unhinged people invested in politics as if they know the people running for office. It used to be a day where people would just say, yeah, I'm voting for so-and-so. Who cares, really? Nothing really gets changed, but now it's like, you're voting for so-and-so, I'm not your friend anymore. I'm disowning you. I'm moving from where I live because I can't live around you. On top of all that, of course, we have people out wearing masks. We have people putting things in their body. They have no idea what it is, but they're so prideful they're willing to take it just to prove a point to people who are opposed to it because they don't want to think that maybe other people know more than them, and the whole purpose of people telling them isn't to act like they know more. It's to try to help them because they're putting something inside of them that they have no idea what it is. Kind of like parents do at birth when they're completely caught off guard, right? And a baby comes out of a mother's womb, a female, by the way. Science, go figure. And people run into the room and they want to stick needles. Hey, we got to get them this, we got to get them that. Got to get them vitamin K. That's the latest that people have told me about. That they're trying to get vitamin K in their kids the last couple of years. It's like, wait, what? Don't they get that naturally from breast milk or even formula? Oh yeah, but they got to get it in. And no one's, suspicious of that. And then all of a sudden these kids are constantly sick. Constantly, we see these horrific commercials of children at children's hospitals. And then who conveniently shows up at the children's hospital? Who's funding the children's hospital? Oh, it's the Shriners. It's the Masons, right? What great people. See how this world works? It's sick. So back to the story here. Okay, you should notice that a lot of the science that they're telling you isn't really science anymore. You should notice it from the fact when they're telling you that men can have babies, okay? They're telling us that these things are going to be responsible because it's a boogeyman that you can't see, that you can't get your hands on, that you can't do anything to. If everybody realized it was a small group of people, it would literally be like a movie scene that they don't want to actually see happen. Where civilians go to the homes and the bunkers, I should say, because most of them are underground, and they find these people and they say, you did this, you're responsible for it, right? But unfortunately, that won't happen because they've created this barrier, which is the left-right divide. Because Democrats are actually defending the same serial killers that want them dead. And Republicans are doing the same thing too, because they're defending their party like communists as well, not realizing that Trump and Mitt Romney and Ron DeSantis These guys are all government assets also, right? They don't want to believe it. And that's, again, what prevents a real revolution. So back to the solar storm, okay? Could stress power grids even more as U.S. deals with major back-to-back hurricanes. It's going to stress power grids. There's going to be a lot of people without power. They're going to kill two birds with one stone. They're going to tell you in Florida probably that the power grid is completely damaged, that they need to put in a new power grid. Of course, we'll pay for it out of our tax money, and it'll be a green, energy efficient power grid, and all those conservatives stuck down there will get forced into potentially green energy, right? Because that's what this is about. It's about infrastructure change. It's about sabotage. AI governance needs the technology in place, right? If we look at what everything they're talking about at the World Economic Forum, and we look past all the memes, and we look past the controlled alt-right media always trying to tickle your ears with humor about Klaus Schwab, and you listen to the meat of what they're talking about. They're talking about a thing called AI governance, right? Okay, here's what you need to know about AI governance. You need the technology in place. You need it in your home, in your hands, and you need it in infrastructure, as in buildings, right? As in schools, as in government buildings, as in stores. It has to be fully in place, full monitoring and surveillance. So everything has to be taken down and built back up. You know the expression build back better, right? All these things I've talked about, the Ouroboros and or for example, the Phoenix Rising, right? These are all things about rebirth, recreating, okay? That's really what's going on here. They're sabotaging our infrastructure, blaming it on things like severe solar storms when they're trying to sabotage our electrical grid so that we could transition to green. And if you listen to the narratives out there about money, then you're not fully awake. They don't care about money. These people are worth endless amounts of money because they print money. They literally print it. They press print and they get money. They're not rich because they're philanthropists. Bill Gates doesn't get his money because he knows what stocks to invest in. I mean, most of the money that they've made to get to this point is all, of course, laundered through trafficking, but we won't go into that because we don't need to get our channel terminated today, even though there's probably a good chance it will. I mean, I can get a channel terminated for talking about Britney Spears hurting someone's feelings. So they don't need money. You got to come out of the narrative of them doing these things for money. It's a sucker's narrative. That's what the Republicans constantly talk about. They want to do the green energy deal because they just want to make money. They're all invested in the stocks. The green energy, all of this stuff is about control. It's about creating a surveillance state run on green energy, which is not sufficient enough for any of us to live the way that we live. Thus, we change how we live. We start living no different than a prisoner in a prison cell. When they say lights out at 8, they mean lights out at 8 in jail. Well, that's what they mean in this new reality they're trying to create. But they're just going to tell you in this dystopia that your lights are out at 8 because you're a good person, and because you're shutting your lights off at 8, somebody in a third world country could use energy now and have electricity when they need it, and we're all doing our part, right? They're convincing you into enslaving yourself by being a nice person, a weak person, without realizing that none of this stuff would even be occurring. It's not needed. It's only needed for them so that they can keep control over us and make us live like prisoners. Their goal is to imprison us. Not enough prisons to do it. We're creating the prisons with our home, with our tech, and even a temporary grid shutdown would make people want more tech. It would make them more dependent on tech because they're not going to shut the grid down for 5 years, right? They could shut the grid down for 3 to 6 months, and a lot of people will die because a lot of people don't have the means to survive, because they are used to getting Uber every day or going to McDonald's. When everything's shut off, they suddenly realize they have nothing in the pantry, have no food saved up because they didn't listen to people like us about a tyrannical government who is literally looking to kill you. And then all of a sudden they go, well, what do I have to do? I need food. I need water. I don't have any. I have no electricity. I have no running water. I can't take a shower. And the government goes, well, come with us. And they go, yeah? Wow, these people are great, even though they're the ones who pressed the off button. Yeah, come with us. You just come inside. You got to make sure, okay, we're going to have this digital identification. You got to make sure you have all your shots lined up for everybody inside. And you'll be so beaten down from all this stuff, from the grid off for days, months, weeks, that you'll comply. Now, I don't mean you or me who listen to this channel. I'm pretty sure most of you are strong enough to not comply. But the majority of sheeple will comply. Even the people who refuse to get it in the first place, the potion, will comply. Because think about how beaten down you'd be with no food or water for 3, 4, 5 days. Potentially. You could die, obviously, without water. pretty quickly, but most people out there are too busy playing Fortnite to even realize that you need food and water to live, and they have none in their home, and they become so dependent on the government that they literally, think that they're always going to be able to go to the grocery store to get these things because you could trust in the government, who has shown you nothing more than they can't actually be trusted. So the grid would lead to a massive depop as well. I've talked about that. A grid shutdown will lead to a lot of deaths. People will die. They will die of dehydration. They will die of starvation. Of course, I think the bigger plan here is that the government comes in, FEMA comes in, they will try to take food from people like you and me and disperse it amongst quote unquote communities and things like that. So they have their blueprint out there for what they have planned for all of us. We don't know exactly what it is verbatim, but they've obviously planned for people like me and you as well. We know they've planned for the Amish. We know they've been going after them. They're off grid, right? So you think with the grid shutdown, well, the Amish have food. Well, they're trying to poison their food. They're trying to seize their food, right? They're creating chemical bombs with trains by their land. They're telling them that they can't farm this or that they have to have certain shots in their chickens, all this type of stuff, deliberately done. Why? Because they know with the grid shutdown that there's an Amish community nearby. Well, people might go there. The Amish may help because maybe they're good people, maybe not. I don't know, depending on the person, right? I mean, they could say they're Christian and then not show the fruits, but whatever. Point being is that they don't want you to be dependent on anything but them. And a grid shutdown would actually make people more dependent on the government because they will beg the government. They will say, fine, I'll ration my electricity every day just to have some electricity. They are going to change our way of life. They're going to blame it on natural events like solar storms and hurricanes when it's them who's doing it deliberately. And they tell you out in the open because they tell you what the plan is for how they expect us to live and how they expect the world to be, right? Equality. They're not talking about, equality from the sense of, well, a person of this color can't get a job because they're that color. That's what they want you to think. They're talking about all of us being equal slaves, all of us having equal income, which is an allowance, which is allotted time on a carbon footprint to go do this and go do that. Whatever you'll still feel free because you get 100 hours of allotted time a year. Like, I'll take 5 hours to go see grandma. So you'll still feel free. It's the illusion of freedom. They'll keep you trapped inside of until one day a light bulb goes off and you go, holy crap, I'm a slave. And then they go, bingo, but guess what? We now control the locks on your home. We control the air conditioner because you got all this fancy tech in your home. You allowed us to put smart meters on your house without realizing what they were. And now you can't find us because we're underground. And the light bulb is off in your head, but it's too late. Everybody's light bulbs need to go on right now, not off. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. God bless all of you and your families as always.